He kept Fleetwood Mac's worst secrets hidden for decades. However, he is now speaking at last. The relationships that ruined friendships. He lost $60 million because of the drugs. Stevie Nicks' decision to prohibit someone from the studio due to disloyalty. Everyone was astonished by something that happened in March 2025. Mick was back in the studio with Lindsey Buckingham. They talked about more than just music, they also talked about the real reasons why the band fell apart and why Stevie might never forgive him. On June 24, 1947, Mick Fleetwood was born in Redruth, Cornwall. Mick grew up in an environment of continual activity and military discipline because his father was a Royal Air Force wing commander. His early years were everything but serene, despite the fact that he was born in a tranquil part of England. Britain was still recuperating from World War II, and Mick's family was constantly moving. The family had relocated to Egypt by the time Mick was 4 years old. They experienced the Suez Crisis in 1956 and the Egyptian Revolution in 1952 throughout the following 6 years. Every day Mick lived the culture. He became aware of the noises, rhythm, and ambience of a place that was entirely apart from England. He developed an unconscious affinity for non-Western music, particularly percussion, as a result of these years. He had already internalized the intricate beats and rich sounds of Egyptian street music even before he became a drummer. Years later, that influence would subtly reappear in his playing. His family moved once more after Egypt, this time to Norway. Mick was 10 years old or so. It was where his father had been deployed by NATO. Mick became fluent in Norwegian after enrolling in local schools. His complete immersion influenced his ability to adjust to new situations, even though he eventually forgot the language. The lengthy winters and striking light patterns of Norway gave him a new perspective on the world. He developed a new understanding of space and mood. His music later reflected this insight, particularly in the way he used rhythm to create atmosphere. He became more independent and developed a familiarity with stillness that most children never acquire as a result of Norway's isolation. However, school was difficult. Mick was irritated and misunderstood because of his terrible dyslexia. Despite being obviously intelligent and creative, he failed tests. Teachers were frequently perplexed. Though he was unable to memorize anything in the conventional sense, he was aware of the answers. At one point, he sobbed beneath a tree and prayed to God to take him away. His parents gave him a little gigster drum equipment when he was 13 years old. Everything changed because of that gift. He learned how to play in the attic on his own. Practice while listening to Cliff Richard records and the Everly Brothers. Developed a natural, instinctive approach without any formal training. What began as therapy turned into a vocation. His family has a creative streak. His father enjoyed playing the drums and writing poetry. His other sister, Sally, experimented with sculpture, while his sister, Susan, went on to become an actor. That same creative stream included Mick. In a Gloucestershire barn behind their home, he constructed a makeshift nightclub when he was 12 years old. Club Keller was the name he gave it. He created a stage, put up lights, and visualized it packed with people. He opened Fleetwood's on Front Street, a legitimate venue in Maui, years later. And he went straight back to that barn for the inspiration. It wasn't just a fantasy from childhood. A vision came to mind. He was well aware that the purpose of music was to create a world that listeners could enter. Mick left school at the age of 15. He was uncomfortable and failing. Surprisingly, his family agreed with the choice. They had faith in him, particularly after witnessing his affinity for music. He relocated to London to pursue his dream after they got him a better drum kit. He purchased a used cab even though he didn't own a car. He used it as his band van. Not only did he have the ability to play, but he also showed up with actual drums and was able to carry them himself, so people began employing him. He was valuable because of that. He began assimilating into the community while sleeping on the floor of his sister Sally's home in Notting Hill. The pace quickened. A musician named Peter Bardens, who lived a few doors away, offered him a gig within a year of his arrival in London. For the Cheneys, Bardens wanted a drummer. Mick was just 16 years old in 1963. They were opening for bands like the Yardbirds and the Rolling Stones almost immediately. They even made an appearance in the 1965 short film Mods and Rockers, in which a young Mick with long hair is seen playing the drums. He hadn't yet reached his 18th birthday when he had formally entered the rock and roll industry. In 1966, he then joined the Bow Street Runners. 2 years prior, the band had previously won a significant competition on the television program Ready Steady Win, which aimed to find the new Beatles. They had won $1,000 in prize money and a recording deal. More than 20,000 copies of their single, I'm a Bow Street Runner, have been sold. They were still enjoying that success until Mick joined. But misfortune befell them. Only a few copies were produced when they issued a promising follow-up single that was predicted to top the charts due to a workers' strike at the record pressing plant. The impetus waned and the music stalled. But that was another step in the right direction for Mick. Then the pivotal moment arrived. He had the opportunity to try out with John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers in April 1967. The blues scene in Britain was centered around the band. It was also a great chance. Despite his fear during the audition, Mick was hired. Bassist John McVie was among the elite musicians he was now performing with. The two grew close, but their happiness was short-lived. Due to his excessive drinking, Mick was eventually fired for attending performances intoxicated. Nevertheless, he gained something from the experience that no school could ever provide. Mayall's group resembled a blues college. Mick was soaking up knowledge from the greats, including Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker. He was evolving beyond his role as a drummer. He was turning into a blues musician. In the end, that dismissal marked the beginning of something far larger. Something minor and unexpected occurred in April 1967 that irrevocably altered the course of music history. Peter Green was given some free studio time by John Mayall. Green recorded 5 songs with John McVie and Mick Fleetwood using it. A straightforward instrumental was the 5th track. Almost as an afterthought, he gave it the name Fleetwood Mac. However, that little song served as the foundation for one of the world's largest bands. In an attempt to persuade McVie to leave Mayall and join, Green then started a new band in July and called it Fleetwood Mac. McVie initially said no. He wanted the security of a regular salary. As a result, Green hired Bob Brunning as a stand-in bassist. MCV changed his mind and joined permanently a few weeks later. Under the moniker Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac starring Jeremy Spencer, the band made their debut on August 13, 1967, at the National Jazz and Blues Festival. February 1968 saw the release of their debut album, and took an unexpected action. Despite not having a single hit song, the album spent 37 weeks at number 4 on the UK charts. Despite never being officially certified, it sold more than 1 million copies in the UK. It wasn't dependent on media hype or radio exposure. Word of mouth and the band's unvarnished live performances helped it grow. Long Grey Mare and Shake Your Moneymaker were among the original songs on the CD that were mixed with blues versions. The album barely registered in the United States, peaking at number 198 on the Billboard list. Brunning started the early recordings in September 1967, but McVie joined and finished the album by November. Its understated success demonstrated that genuine talent may still emerge without ostentatious promotion. By the end of 1968, everything had altered due to 2 new faces. 18-year-old Danny Kirwan was the first to arrive. Green had witnessed him perform with his band, Boiler House, in a boiler room. Green offered them a support slot because he was so impressed. However, Green posted a job posting for a new guitarist after the others declined to pursue professional status. No one matched Kirwan out of the more than 300 applicants. He was merely asked to become their 3rd guitarist by Green. Next was Christine Perfect. She was still in Chicken Shack and had recently won the Melody Maker Readers Award for Best Female Vocalist. She was a guest keyboardist on the band's 2nd album. Albatross was published by Fleetwood Mac later that year. The song became their first number 1 success in Europe when Green and Kirwan traded lead guitars. Green later claimed that the song would never have been successful without Danny. They released Mr. Wonderful, their 2nd album, in August 1968. It had a raw, live feel because it was recorded live in a studio with actual amplifiers and a PA system. Despite not being a formal member yet, Christine Perfect also provided keyboards. With songs like Stop Messin' Round, the album signaled a departure from strictly blues. Remarkably, Fleetwood Mac caught the attention of the Beatles, who seriously contemplated signing him to their Apple label. Clifford Davis, their manager, however, declined the offer. Rather, the group got a record deal with Warner Brothers via Reprise Records, and they have been there ever since. Their label issues also started at this time. After leaving Blue Horizon, they briefly worked for the financially troubled Immediate Records. It compelled them to look for a steady record deal once more. Another significant alteration occurred in September 1969. The album Then Continues to Play indicated that they were moving into psychedelic rock. It was a daring departure from blues, and it was successful. Oh well, the album's lead single peaked at number 2 in the UK, while the album itself peaked at number 4. Peter Green's and Danny Kirwan's contributions combined to produce a fresh sound. At about the same time, the band took a plane to Chicago to record with blues greats Willie Dixon, Buddy Guy, and Otis Spann at Chess Records. The album's edge, which helped define their new direction, came from the blues and psychedelic elements. Green's Rattlesnake Shake was particularly noteworthy. The record demonstrated that they were not limited to a single genre and could develop into something far more expansive. Then catastrophe struck. During the band's European tour in March 1970, Peter Green attended a party in Munich. The gathering took place at a commune that was allegedly affiliated with a cult. There, Green took LSD. Far more powerful than anything he had previously possessed. Some believe his drink was tampered with. He returned, a different person. Their manager claims that Green began discussing money as if it were evil. He even desired to distribute all of the band's profits. He quit the band completely in less than 2 months. After receiving a diagnosis of schizophrenia, he underwent electroconvulsive treatment. It was a terrible loss when he left. Just as the band was finally starting to get noticed. Christine McVie joined the band in August 1970, 10 days prior to their US tour. She had previously performed as a session musician on multiple Fleetwood Mac albums, but she had retired from music a year prior after leaving Chicken Shack to concentrate on her marriage to John McVie. She provided keyboards, vocals, and even the cover art for the Kilnhouse CD. The record, which was released in September, was a watershed. The band started to shift towards a more melodic, mainstream sound after Christine joined. Her presence filled the emotional and musical void left by Peter Green. One casual question was all it took, she recalled later. "Would you like to join, Chris?" She was in an instant. Then Jeremy Spencer vanished in February 1971. He said he was heading to a bookshop as he departed his Los Angeles hotel. He never returned. Spencer was not present at the Whiskey A Go Go, where the band was supposed to perform. The FBI searched for him for 5 days before locating him. He had become a member of the Children of God, a religious organization. He had a new name and a shaved head when the band next met him. According to Mick Fleetwood, he was a zombie who was constantly muttering, "Jesus loves you." Spencer claimed that a street musician had invited him to their center since he had been feeling disoriented. Later, the cult was deemed to be among the most violent in American history. To replace him, Bob Welch was brought in. Fleetwood Mac continued to operate even after losing 2 of its original members. Their 5th album, Future Games, was released in September 1971. The tone was very different. The blues had vanished. Rather, they adopted vocal harmonies and melodic rock. Although it didn't chart in the UK, this new direction was well liked in America. Their developing sound was first heard in the single Dragonfly. CBS's first Greatest Hits CD was issued in Europe at the end of the year. Under the new leadership of Welch and Christine McVie, the band started laying the groundwork for its future success. They released Bare Trees in 1972, which included Christine's Spare Me a Little of Your Love and Welch's Sentimental Lady. When they performed live, both songs became hits. Though it was a subtle turn, future games permanently altered their course. Bob Welch, who contributed a jazz and R&B background to the album, softened and refined the band's sound. Additionally, it was the first full album with Christine McVie officially on board. With more than 500,000 copies sold, it went gold in 2000 after peaking at number 91 on the US Billboard chart. However, Danny Kirwan ran into a wall that year. Since he was 18, he had been writing and recording constantly with the band. The pressure finally came to him in 1972. He was hardly eating and drinking a lot. He cut himself off from everyone on a tour. He then broke his guitar before a performance and declined to play. It was back at the hotel that the band met. They released him. It was inevitable and depressing. Following the firing, Bob Welch later recalled seeing Kirwan in a pub. Kirwan replied, "You're going to need it," and sarcastically wished him luck. The band had to postpone parts of the tour and lost 2 weeks of performances. The final component of their initial core to disintegrate was Kirwan's departure. More drama came out in 1974. After having an affair with Jenny Boyd, the wife of Mick Fleetwood, guitarist Bob Weston was sacked. While Fleetwood was frequently away and used cocaine, she was already battling addiction and attempting to raise children. He was devastated by the treachery. Heroes Are Hard to Find was the band's September release. Although it was their best-to-date number 34 on the Billboard list, the tour failed. Nearly half of the venues were occupied. When Welch yelled at John McVie on stage over a mistake, tensions in Las Vegas erupted. As soon as the tour was over, Welch resigned. The band was on the verge of disbanding. Nobody could have foreseen how successful Fleetwood Mac's self-titled album would become when it was released in 1975. It finally peaked at number 1 on the Billboard 200 after 58 weeks. That's increasing for almost a year. It began slowly, almost too slowly. No one could have foreseen the success of Fleetwood Mac's self-titled album when it was released in 1975. It finally peaked at number 1 on the Billboard 200 after 58 weeks. By painful step, that's more than a year of rising. However, it became one of the most recognizable turning moments in rock history when it peaked on September 4, 1976. In the United States alone, it sold more than 9 million copies. And 7.48 million globally. Ironically, the album was neglected in the UK for over a year. It never made it over number 23, and it didn't even make the charts until November 1976. However, all that came after was made possible by that gradual burn. And things weren't easy after that. The band was already disintegrating in 1976 when they began recording Rumors. The use of cocaine was continuous. Mick Fleetwood recently learned that one of his close friends was having an affair with his wife. Following 8 years of marriage, Christine and John McVie were divorcing. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were still compelled to work together after their recent breakup, which resulted in daily yelling battles that only stopped when the red recording light came on. Fleetwood and Nicks had begun their own relationship by the end of that year. In front of her ex-husband, Christine started dating the lighting director for the band. It seemed like a battlefield in the studio. Despite all of that stress, the music continued. Buckingham's not-so-subtle warning to Nicks became "go your own way." "Don't stop" was Christine's strategy for progress. No one was talking on the mic, yet they all expressed their emotions on tape. Ultimately, Rumors became viral. In the first month following its release in early 1977, the album sold over 10 million copies. That figure eventually increased to more than 40 million globally. It held the top spot on the Billboard 200 for 31 weeks that weren't consecutive. Dreams, which peaked at number 1, was one of 4 songs that made it into the top 10. The only song ever given credit to all 5 members was The Chain. Rumors took home the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1978. Then Tusk appeared. It was wild, costly, and experimental. Making the album in 1979 cost $1.4 million, or more than $6 million in today's currency. In order to record it, they even constructed a studio. Fleetwood justified the expenditure by claiming that it was their own money and that they had the right to make the things they want. His tribal drumming was heard on the title tune. On one tune, however, Buckingham employed a Kleenex box as a snare drum. At one point, he even used mics affixed to the studio floor to sing while performing push-ups. He was previously described as a crazy by engineer Ken Kylett, who used nail scissors to hack off all of his hair after a stressful outburst. Although Tusk pushed the envelope, its effect and sales never kept up with rumors. The band was worn out and split as a result of the risk. Fleetwood Mac needed a victory by 1982. They got that from Mirage. When it was released on July 2, it immediately rocketed to the top of the charts and brought them back to softer rock tones. For 7 weeks, Hold Me remained at number 4. Number 12 was hit by Gypsy. Even though Love and Store peaked at number 22, the fissures were more severe than before. Compared to the Tusk tour, which covered over 100 cities, their Mirage tour was significantly shorter, covering only 29 cities. Lindsey Buckingham had already started to back off. He was finished by the end of the tour. He would not rejoin the band until 1997 because he felt cut off from its ideals. His resignation signaled the start of other departures, instability, and severe financial difficulties. Soon later, Mick Fleetwood made his worst error. He spent $3 million on a 1,000-acre farm in Australia in the beginning of the 1980s. It included a fishing lake and 8 residences. However, he barely stayed for 3 weeks before deciding he couldn't cope with the way of life. To purchase it, he had taken out a $2 million advance, and when the funds ran out, he had to borrow an additional $2 million. The value had already decreased when he attempted to sell it. The sale price was less than the mortgage debt. Due to that one poor choice and dwindling band revenue, he declared bankruptcy in 1984. Even his green card had to be revoked. He had lost almost everything that had formerly brought him cartloads of money from rumors. Tango in the Night, which the band recorded in 1987, was another hit. It had hits like Little Lies. However, everyone was taken aback by Lindsey Buckingham just before the trip. He announced his resignation during a meeting held at Christine McVie's home on August 7. He claimed to feel undervalued. A brawl broke out during the meeting. Buckingham and Stevie Nicks got into a physical altercation. He left the following day. The band was unable to back out because they had already signed contracts. So they replaced him with Rick Vito and Billy Burnett. Someone held up a sign that read, "Lindsey who?" on Kansas City's opening night. The fans had already moved on. Then an odd turn of events occurred. Behind the Mask was published by Fleetwood Mac on April 10, 1990. Buckingham had left the group. However, in the title track, he played an acoustic guitar. The record scarcely made an impression in the United States, despite the fact that the new 6-piece lineup had 4 singer-songwriters. It got platinum after debuting at number 1 in the UK. It also featured one of the earliest use of CD plus G encoding, which allowed images and lyrics to show on TV screens as the music was being played. Both Rick Vito and Stevie Nicks departed following the tour. The band was admitted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that same year. Both the members from the Rumors era and the original late 1960s lineup were inducted. But not included was Bob Welch, who had kept the band together in the early 1970s. In 1995, things worsened much further. Dave Mason and Becca Bramlett were introduced during the album period. It turned out to be Christine McVie's last record as a full member, and Stevie Nicks was not present. It didn't even chart in the US after its October 9 release, peaking at number 47 in the UK. Only 32,000 copies had been sold by 1996. It was a catastrophe behind the scenes. Bramlett and Mason were at odds all the time. He shared improper stories about his personal life and smoked cigars on the tour bus, which infuriated her. One of Mick Fleetwood's greatest regrets, he subsequently admitted, was assembling that line. It all fell apart in a year. After yet another altercation on the bus, he faxed Bramlett off. Then a glimmer of optimism appeared in 1997. The band got back together for an MTV special on May 23. The dance was captured on film in real time at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. Once more, it was the traditional Rumors lineup. In its first week of release, the album sold close to 200,000 copies, landing it at the top of the Billboard 200. It sold more than 1 million copies in just 2 months. It rose to rank among the top 5 live albums ever sold in the United States. However, it also marked the end of something. The following year, Christine McVie quit the band. The Dance's DVD version was certified 9 times platinum and sold over 135,000 copies in Australia alone. It was a moving farewell to a band that had seen it all. From sluggish starts and heartbreaking splits to drug abuse and financial ruin. Say You Will, Fleetwood Mac's 17th and last studio album, was released in April 2003. 5 years have passed since Christine McVie's departure from the band. She nonetheless made an appearance on a couple tunes even though she was no longer a full member. The record turned out to be an unexpected hit. With 218,000 copies sold in the first week, it debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. Since Mirage in 1982, it was the band's first album to place in the top 3. 500,000 copies had been shipped by July, and it had already achieved gold status in the US. It sold more than 100,000 copies and peaked at number 6 in the UK. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham operated the majority of the keyboards. For the first time in 15 years, they collaborated in the studio. The title tune rose to number 17 on the adult contemporary chart, and the single, Peacekeeper, reached the Hot 100. Following this period of achievement, Mick Fleetwood went back to his musical origins. He and guitarist Rick Vito founded the Mick Fleetwood Blues Band in 2008. Blue Again, their 2009 album, was nominated for a Grammy for Best Traditional Blues Album. For Fleetwood, whose career started in the British blues scene, it was a full-circle event. Fleetwood had performed with Peter Green and backed artists like John Mayall long before the big smashes. He was able to return to the raw blues he liked with this new group, leaving behind polished pop music. Fleetwood's steady rhythm and Rick Vito's guitar complemented each other flawlessly, producing a timeless yet modern sound. Fleetwood revealed his past in his candid memoir, Play On, published in 2014. His statement that he had lost almost $60 million as a result of his cocaine addiction was the most startling. He was bankrupt by 1984, drowning in debt totaling $3.7 million, which was more than 1.5 times his net worth. He hardly recalled the 2 years he was unable to work. However, he expanded as he recovered. He started Fleetwood Private Cellar, a winery that operated for more than 14 years. His wines won more than 10 international honors and sold in the millions. He experimented with photography at the same time, exhibiting hand-painted pieces in exhibitions in places like Toronto and Atlanta. He launched the restaurant Fleetwood's on Front Street in Maui in 2012. Since his early years, when he used to host make-believe clubs in his family's barn, he had clung to this goal. The eatery was a success. At the 2013 Maui County Fair, it took up top honors, including Best New Restaurant and Best Overall Chile. But catastrophe struck in August 2023. Lahaina was burned by wildfires, and the restaurant was completely demolished. Fleetwood flew to Maui right away with supplies even though he was in Los Angeles at the time. Many of his employees were homeless. The Lahaina fire surpassed even the 2018 Camp Fire in California to become the deadliest wildfire in the United States in almost a century. Fleetwood collaborated with ukulele virtuoso Jake Shimabukuro on a very personal project in 2024. They paid tribute to Christine McVie, who passed away in 2022, with their album Blues Experience. A homage to McVie's song Songbird, which was recorded in 2 separate versions, was the album's emotional high point. Fleetwood produced a subtle yet potent sound by modifying his drumming to fit Shimabukuro's ukulele's mellow tones. As in homage to the band's early years, they also played some of the old blues hits again, such as Need Your Love So Bad. The Songbird tribute, according to critics, felt genuine and eerie. Fleetwood's desire to preserve McVie's legacy was evident in each note. Like the band's music, Fleetwood's personal life was frequently tumultuous. In 1970, he wed Jenny Boyd. When he found out she was having an affair with the band's guitarist, Bob Weston, his marriage fell up in 1973. Following their last performance in Lincoln, Nebraska, Fleetwood fired Weston and called off the remainder of the tour. In 1977, he and Jenny remarried, but primarily to facilitate the immigration of their children, Amy and Lucy, to the United States. By 1978, that second effort had resulted in divorce once more. During their Australian tour later that year, Fleetwood began an affair with Stevie Nicks. It was chaotic, wild, and driven by drink and drugs. Nicks later said that if they hadn't been so drunk, it wouldn't have happened. At the time, Fleetwood was still legally bound to Boyd, but she was seeing Don Henley. It was longer than any of them could fully recall, and Fleetwood recalled it as chaotic. Nicks referred to it as dread. Numerous people were harmed, and it had little effect. However, their working connection and friendship managed to endure. A new scandal started as that chapter came to a conclusion. Fleetwood moved in with one of Nicks's best friends, Sarah Wrecker, while they were still dating. At the time, Wrecker was married, and Nicks was heartbroken by the betrayal. The band even barred Sarah from the studio. Fleetwood eventually wed Wrecker in 1988. In a well-known wedding that was attended by George Harrison, Bob Dylan, and Stevie Nicks, who wore a white outfit. The 7-year marriage ended in 1995, but the emotional wounds were never completely healed. Fleetwood married Lynn Frankel in the same year. With a duration of over 20 years, it would be his longest partnership. Ruby and Tessa, their twin daughters, were born in 2002. They were splitting up by 2013. Fleetwood was 55 at the time. Although he preferred Frankel to have primary physical custody, he requested split legal custody. He claimed to be fortunate to have his 95-year-old mother in his life when he brought her into his house at that time. In November 2015, their divorce was finalized. The twins were only 13 at the time. In 2006, Fleetwood also obtained U.S. citizenship and divided his time between residences in Los Angeles and Maui. Fleetwood, who is now in his late 70s, has slowed down. From his home on Maui, he spends time with his family and frequently spends quiet time with his granddaughter. He still wishes for the healing of old band wounds. Although a full Fleetwood Mac reunion is improbable due to Christine McVie's death in 2022, he hasn't given up on getting back together. Between Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, something unexpected occurred in March 2025. Buckingham made his first studio appearance with Fleetwood since his dismissal in 2018. He worked on Fleetwood's next solo album, which Carl Falk is producing. Falk said Buckingham appeared genuinely thrilled for Fleetwood and called the event surreal.